I'm here today to talk about a journey that I'm on to design a perfectly imperfect life for myself, because we do live in a perfect world, and that's causing a lot of problems. So that's what I want to share with you today, and I'm going to challenge you to take some things out into the world and change the way that you interact with people. This journey that I'm on started in an art gallery in Seoul, where I was deeply confronted, challenged, and moved by a rock. Now, I realize how silly that sounds. I was almost moved to tears by this rock. But it made me question my life. And that sounds even sillier. I was standing there with my son, and this work is called Relate 'em by Iu Fan. And it's about how objects interact with each other and what we project out into the world. And these two rocks are in a relationship of some description. And my son was 5, and he was with me, and he's grown up around the art. And we were talking about what the artist was intending. And he said to me, "What do you think they're saying?" And I said, "I don't know, buddy. What do you think they're saying?" And he thought about it for a minute, and he went, "They're probably talking about being a rock." Because that's what they are. They're rocks. And I thought about that for a second, and he was right. And that's what the artist was trying to say. These rocks are rocks, and they're trying to project the fact that they're rocks. They're not projecting anything else into the world. But I was presenting a vision to the world of myself, and it wasn't who I am. And it didn't feel right. I was going after this perfect life. And from the outside, it looked pretty good. But inside, I knew it didn't feel right. It felt a little bit hollow. So I thought, I want to change that. I want to transform that. And I thought, how am I going to do that? Well, all my career, I've been transforming brands. So why don't I apply some of the techniques that I've been using to redesign brands to myself and see where that leads me? We live in a world where busyness has become a badge of honor. We are obsessed with being busy. We seem scared not to be busy. How many people in this room have answered the question, how are you with busy? How are you going? Good, busy. Yeah, me too, so busy, yeah. It's like that. Time's going fast, isn't it? We seem obsessed with this. We're constantly consuming content. We binge watch television shows. We stream listen to podcasts. We're scrolling, we're clicking, we're liking. And this is already in a world where we're bombarded by so much content every single day. We've become mental hoarders. We just seem obsessed with filling our lives with stuff. So we end up in a mental state like this all the time. But why? Why do we do this? Well, I think it's because we're searching for that perfection. We see these other people out there and we go, oh, they've got a perfect life. They've got a perfect life. I want that. And then we just go after all of this stuff. We think if we just consume enough stuff, we'll get the secret, we'll get the answer, and all of a sudden we'll have a perfect life. But that's not how it works. So we're going through life, filling ourselves up with stuff. As I said, we've become mental hoarders. We're unable to release stuff. And the problem with that is that when you're full, when you have no space inside you, you can't be creative. You can't connect. You can't be open to those moments of inspiration that can spark those incredible random occurrences that can create new ideas because you're so focused. You've narrowed your worldview down because you just don't have the mental capacity anymore. You've filled it with stuff. And what's worse than that is that negative things, when they happen to you in life, and they will, tend to rise to the surface. All of the good stuff you're achieving gets lost in that kind of busy mass that's inside your head. And so what happens is your brain reacts like a defense mechanism. So all the negative stuff that's happening, it picks up on it, goes, I've got to deal with that, got to deal with that. And what happens? You get an unbalanced view of what your life is like. Because you seem like you're only fighting fires, you're only putting out negative things. So you go through life and you go, geez, I'm busy, got a lot on, nothing's going right. And that leads to problems with anxiety. It leads to stress. It leads to burnout. It leads to mental health challenges. This way of life that we seem so obsessed with actively following is actually hurting us. And yet we don't care. We just continue to blaze on, fly off towards the horizon, continually consuming stuff. And in fact, I've noticed in my research that we've evolved some new methodologies to help us continue to live that way. Continue to live that way that's hurting us. I call them autopilot systems. We've created these processes because we don't have the mental capacity to think about certain things in our life. So we give it over to the autopilot system, like in a plane, and it flies it for us. Now, these might be small things, like getting dressed in the morning or your commute to work. But my research has revealed that we're starting to give over more important elements of our life to these autopilot systems. Relationships, parenting. We're not present for some of these moments. We'll be interacting with our partner or our friends, and we're not actually there. We're going on autopilot because we've become obsessed with consuming so much information and keeping it in our head. And we don't realize this. We look all around us and we think we're doing the right thing, but we don't actually see what's happening. Looking and seeing are not the same thing. And it's really important for us to realize that. I did a social experiment a couple of years ago where I learned a different magic trick every week for a year. It taught me a lot about myself, it taught me a lot about presence and perspective and a whole lot of other things. I used it in my work and in my personal life. But one of the things that I learned from that is that the success of a magic trick is far more reliant on an audience's inability to see than it is on a magician's ability to perform the trick. Even if a magician gets up in front of you and tells you straight out what they're going to do and then does it, you still don't see it because you'll click into autopilot straight away and you'll miss what's going on right in front of you. So looking and seeing are not the same thing. And I'm going to come back a couple of times to that during my talk today, because what happens is you get into a situation like this. Words appear in front of you straight away. You think, I've got to read it really quickly. So your mental pilot sort of kicks in and you're like, oh shit, I'm reading it wrong. And in a moment, your brain's like, oh, hang on, what's going on here? But that's what we're doing. We're narrowing down our worldview constantly. This is a really interesting artwork. It's called Zen for Television by the Korean artist Namjoon Park. And he produced this work from the 60s through to the 80s. He was really concerned with the amount of television we were consuming. And he's an artist in general who was years ahead of his time. So what he did is he compressed the image on the screen down into a single line, effectively rendering the television inoperable. But that's what we do to ourselves. By narrowing our worldview down, we effectively render our own bodies as inoperable because we can't see the bigger picture. We can't connect. We can't design a better life for ourselves because we've become so obsessed with this inward focus, narrow worldview. And I thought, that can't be right. How can we broaden this view out? How can we create new opportunities or new vision for ourselves? What's the secret? And I began to look into this and I began to research it personally and through my work. And I realized that we already hold the secret and the key to be able to do this. Our ancestors were certainly able to do it. And the key lies in your memories. If you reflect back on the experiences or the memories that have lingered with you, good and bad, they're going to have two things in common. They would have disrupted a process and they would have connected you to eternity. And these are the two elements that you as designers can redesign and hack to create a new life for yourself, a new life for your clients and your friends and your brands. And I'm going to talk through both of them. Let's start with disrupting a process. As I said, throughout my career, I've worked in predominantly the luxury industries, transforming brands, and I began to notice a pattern. The brands and the transformation projects that were the most successful were the ones that broke people's processes, that disrupted them, even if just for a moment. Because what happens when your process is disrupted is your worldview goes from this to this, even if it's just for a second. Like before, when you read those words and you realize you were reading them wrong, your brain scrambles for something to do. And in that moment, if I put something else in front of you, you're going to engage with it in a different way, different to how you would have previously. Now, it might be very small. I might be using thick pile carpet in the design of a retail store, which slows your step down. So you breaks your stride when you walk into the store and all of a sudden you look at something different. Or it could be a scent. Again, it's getting back to that magic. How do I trick people into doing this? Or if you think of a classic example of a disruption of the process, which is the Apple box, the iPhone box, that suction. It disrupts that process just for a minute so that then when you're confronted with the actual phone itself, you see it differently. As a case study, I'm currently working in the wine industry, transforming how people see wine. Wine as an industry has been done the same way for hundreds of years. It's a very process-driven industry. And retail, if you actually Google 100-year-old wine store, it looks exactly the same as a wine store today. Sold the same way, very process-driven. So I'm designing a whole sort of strategic change for this business. How do we reposition wine for the next generation? And it's all around disrupting process, disrupting the way that wine's traditionally done. We've developed this digital platform as part of that process, an experience platform, and we break every single CX and UX rule in the process. We deliberately try and lose users. It's got an infinite scroll. It's got no content hierarchy. You can move the items around on the homepage. We have what we call a scenic route to get to the checkout. There's a highway as well. But the scenic route is in there deliberately for you to explore, for you to disrupt your process and create moments of exploration and moments of wonder. And everything about the product, the way that we photograph it, the way that we write about it, is designed to disrupt your process. I'm going to have a link at the end so you can actually go and check this platform out and some of the other things I'll talk about. But that's been effective. It's working really strongly. And that's what I noticed. Every single time I did this throughout my career, it would resonate with people. You just think of pairing notes as a perfect example. Traditionally, chicken, fish with this wine. But this wine pairs with a Mark Rothko painting or good conversation. Now, I can guarantee that everyone in the room would want to know what this wine was first, because it's disrupting your process. So what can you disrupt? That's my challenge to you. Think about these processes that you don't question anymore, because I guarantee they will be contributing to that busyness lifestyle and that busyness mindset that we talked about earlier. What can you disrupt? A classic one that I often challenge people on is headphones when you're commuting. Leave your headphones out, especially today as you leave this space. If you just automatically just put them in without even thinking, blaze up a podcast, some other sort of music, leave them out. You'll be amazed about how much different you'll see the world as you're walking around. Especially today, your brain will go into overdrive. Your brain is an amazing, incredible, powerful tool. It will disseminate all the information that you've heard today, and stuff will move from your head to your heart and will live with you and hopefully change you. But if you stick your headphones in, you'll lose some stuff. So what can you disrupt? Because if you can disrupt that process, you'll give yourself far more clarity. The second step is around connection to eternity. And I realize that sounds very grand and very wide-reaching, but it effectively means stepping out into the bigger world, becoming aware of the world around you. We'd like to think it revolves around us, but it doesn't. So how can you actually step out and go beyond and experience new things and see the world for how wonderful and truly amazing it is? That's what connection to eternity means. Because if you talk before around disrupting a process and creating memories, you think of something classic like childbirth. Obviously, childbirth disrupts a process. It disrupts a lot of processes. But it connects you to eternity. All of a sudden, you see things differently. You have a child to care for. You view the world differently. So if you can start to look at this into the world, you can see how you can start to redesign these lives, these perfectly imperfect lives, instead of going after this perfection that we all seem obsessed with. And the real secret to this is actually looking at how you shift from looking to seeing. How do you really see the world out there? And the secret to that, how do you see the world, is through clarity and context. You will get greater clarity when you start disrupting your processes. I guarantee it. And if you can add context into that, then you'll be able to transform how you see the world. Because we live in a world that's devoid of context. Context has become a luxury. Most of the images, most of the content we're confronted with on a daily basis is devoid of context. It's a real shame. We need to add that back into the world. This is a gallery in Sydney that I co-founded with my wife. We only show a single work of art at a time, and we focus on promoting the art of artists with Asian heritage. Again, it's about disrupting process. It's about showing art in a different way to confront people, to make them connect to it differently. There's an audio experience related to the space. You step into it, you can really engage it, but it's about recontextualization of this art. What is the artist's message? How can you connect with it? And then when you actually step into the space itself, it acts as an immersive experience that extends the artwork in the window. You almost literally step into the artwork and become a part of it and actually connect to what the artist is trying to say. And it's very confronting to a lot of people that step into the space, because some people might just be walking home from Woolies, walk past the store and go, what's this? Come inside and actually be really challenged. And I've seen people being moved to tears in the space because they just didn't expect it. And the thing with this is, I believe that art is one of our greatest tools, our greatest assets, to be able to help us to see the world differently. Because all our life we're taught to look at art, but we're never taught to see it. And it's one of the things that my wife and I have been focusing on with our children. How can we teach them to see art, not just look at it, to connect to artists? And I mean, they're obviously in the space a lot, so that they get it and they get to talk to these artists, to develop that skill. Because if you can learn to do that with artwork, it's going to be very easy for you to step out and be able to do it with bigger things in your life. And again, it comes back to contextualization. Because with context, the power is seeing something for what it actually is first, not what you want it to be or think it might be, which is what we're too quick to do, especially when we've got this very narrow worldview. So how can we broaden that out? How can we connect to it deeply and understand it for what it is first, and then how it relates to us? And that's the really important and powerful tool, and that's what art can teach you to do. I'll give you an example. This is an artwork by an artist called Sophie Honus, who's a First Nations artist, and this is, I believe it's on view at the NGV at the moment. It depicts a creek near her home. And the interesting thing about a lot of First Nations art, especially landscape painting, is the artist will depict the landscape from an aerial point of view. Now, using this perspective, they're able to integrate story and landscape and people together in a way where they all work together. There's no hierarchy. There's no object of reference in terms of like, this is the most important thing in the painting. It all works together. And so if you can understand that and you can think about it, then when you go outside and you see another very famous waterway which is just passes by this building, you will look at it in a different way. Instead of just walking past the Yarra and not even thinking about it, you'll actually stop. You'll think about how it moves through the landscape, not past it. And then you'll think about how you interact with it. Do you cross over it? Are you walking around it? Are you on it? Are you in it? And then that's going to give you a far more profound connection to the land that you're working on and to the way that the First Nations view the land that you're walking on than any sort of autopilot acknowledgement of the country that we throw in at the start of a presentation ever will. Because sadly, that's another thing that we've given over to autopilot systems in many cases. We just rattle it off at the start without even thinking. But we need it to connect to us, and that's on us to actually take that out into the world and reteach ourselves. How do we see that? How do we reframe that? Because when you start to do that, you open your eyes up to all of this wondrous stuff that exists in the world around you. You start to live that bigger life. You start to connect to eternity. And that's the opportunity, because there's so much amazing stuff out there that you can become aware of that we just don't see because we close everything off. And that's my challenge to you today. How do you take this skill and use it? Use it in your work. Use it to disrupt brands. Use it to disrupt businesses. But how about yourself? You're all designers. Redesign your own life. Use these skills. It doesn't stop when you walk out of the office. How do you use it to change a life? That's my next chapter. That's my next challenge. I'm working on a project at the moment addressing youth suicide between Australia and Korea, and using fashion and story and design to actually challenge that, to make people see things differently, to be aware that there's another side to every story and actually connect with it, so that these things don't just become clothes, they become actually living and breathing things that force people to step out into the world. I'm collecting stories, and if you want to get involved and help out, there's a link at the end, please do. Because what I want to leave you with is this thought. This is not a grand change. This is not going to be an overnight complete reinvention to yourself. It's an understanding that it's okay to go after this perfectly imperfect life. And it's kind of fitting that the quote is from the same artist that started this whole process. It's about making small changes day after day. Disrupt those processes that you're aware of. Change those things that are in everyday life that you can change. And then make yourself more aware of context, more aware of that bigger world, and connect beyond, connect to eternity. Connect to that something bigger. And if you do that enough, you'll actually move things so the world does appear more vividly to you. I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. I'll be outside at lunchtime if you want to see anything, chat more. Thank you very much.